Good morning. What is great, good, and real, and welcome. Good morning. What is great, good, and real, and welcome to day 40 of the Do You Rules live stream experience. I am still a human, affectionately, I think so, referred to as Cliche Jeff. And it is Sunday morning, and we're going to talk. No shit. I'm in front of a microphone, live streaming. What else would you be doing? We're going to start our week. We're going to get into some things around what it could possibly mean when I say it is we who defines things. It is we who defines things. I went to sleep. As I was falling into sleep, this saying came into my head. It is we who defines things. It is we who defines things. And I was in such a deep sleep as it was occurring. I was telling myself not to forget what I was saying because I thought it was important based on how I was thinking about it. It could have also been the fact that I was just falling asleep. But I pulled myself back out of sleep to write it down on my phone. I want to get into it. I want to get into it. Red Book of Dominance, the pen that fell from it, the chapstick. What time is it? You goddamn right it is. You understand? One second. I have a lot I want to say. I have a lot I want to say, and I am in my head hoping it comes out the way I want to say it, which which goes right into the question of if I said to you all, it is we who defines things, what would that mean to you? What could that possibly mean to me? And as I think about that line, it is we who defines things. The thought of that, it is we who defines things, for me, it leads toward the sprouting out of many other questions. How do I define me? How do I define we? How do I define anything that is definable? The reality is I define it. And so in that way, I feel like I just had a confrontation with God. I just asked some serious questions. All right. I I just I want to know some things. I want to know some things, and the only way I feel like I can get answers is from God. At this juncture in my life, whether ignorant or not, whether naive or not, misguided or not, whatever. I don't know who else, what else, or how else to rely on an answer than to seek it by myself, as God, through God, for God. So I rely on God. And so if I have decided if I'm going to rely on God, then sometimes it's just going to be some conflict. And I know that God knows this about me. That I'm going to question things because I've learned, as I've already discussed, and what I really want to promote and hope that is resonating with anyone and everyone who decides to come across this experience with me. the autonomy and freedom I seek is over myself. When I have autonomy and freedom over myself, I can define life however I choose to define life. However, and in the same way, as I seek autonomy and freedom and continued authority over my life, I continue to wrestle with the ideas and concepts around how things are being defined in my life. Because I can't separate, no matter how much I read, no matter how much I think about universal law, the power of manifestation, faith, God, universe, creator, separating what I am seeing with what I see it becomes difficult and overly complex. And maybe I need to see somebody else that is an actual flesh human like me to help me rationalize through these things. That's why there's people out there, right, that offer help. I question that sometimes. Maybe I get too isolated, so isolated that naturally, if I'm only seeing what I see, then I'm defining it how I see it. The only definition I have is mine. I need a contrast. I need a contrast, do I not? How else would I know? We talk about deeply and regularly and over about the polarities of life, the pendulum swings, the dichotomies that exist. In order to allow you to understand, perceive, and define, you must understand, at least at minimum, a positive and a negative effect, or a forward and a back, a left and a right, right? So in that way, this thought, it is we who defines things. It is we who defines things. It is we who defines things. I begin to start to define some things that I believe should be occurring. And when I start to define some things that I believe that should be occurring, I rationalize and I reason. There comes a point, of course, this is day 40. But for all intents and purposes, I've been creating and marching towards, whether consciously or not, most of it was unconsciously, subconsciously, and without what could be what could be defined as proper and defined proper. But the direction and definition of authority and autonomy and freedom I seek, I had to clearly have an awakening to understand what I was doing. But if I reflect back in my life, I was always pushing and marching towards defining myself in a way that I thought was highly controllable for myself. I always sought that level of freedom, in a sense that I've always felt like success was due to me. Success was inevitable for me. Success was attainable. I've never not felt like, in any area of my life that's been presented to me, I've never felt incompetent the minute I've decided to define what it is I decided to define for myself. It is we who defines things. However, in the same way, I haven't reached the levels of success in every area I push towards to the maximum availability of success in that area. Meaning there's some things that I've quit in my life. I made some progress. I've got some wins. I've stacked a bit, put in some time, and then for lack of a better term, I paused it. Never really went back to it. And so therefore, in that way, I sort of closed that chapter. And I knew, as I reflected and as I'm getting older and a little bit wiser, hopefully, and I'm losing my hair for a reason, I can reflect back to say, damn, I left a lot of meat on that bone, right? I left a lot of meat on that bone. I got some, I got some. I certainly ate. I certainly progressed. I certainly wouldn't be where I'm at now and defined in the way that I'm defined that allows me to be pursuant towards the actualization, realization, fulfillment, and success I seek without any of those endeavors. So when I look back to reflect and how do we define, and it is we who defines these things, I can know that they were necessary. However, in the same way, we could argue that I define them as necessary Because if I don't and I didn't, I would just stop what I'm doing right now. Which you can then reason and make a logical argument for is convenient. It's convenient for me to look back on all that could have been and say, yeah, this was intended for me to learn from. And this was just a small step, a small obstacle for me to launch forward in this new endeavor. This was always waiting for me. Why? Because if you it is we who defines things. I could easily look back in all those areas of my life and say, quitter, you're weak, dog. See, all this, how about this? How about this? If we look, if it is we who defines things, and I look back on my journey of life, and this is my 44th trip around the sun, come December, I can say that there's more evidence to suggest that we could easily define my life as a failure. Because I've made many stops, many pauses, many errors, many failures have come along the way. So, what is it about those failures that leads me to believe that the only thing that I should really consider as inevitable, all that really awaits me is what has always presented itself to me, which is what? You'll fail at some point. You'll stop at some point. You will quit at some point. Why? It is we who defines things. And I know in the crevices of my soul where people can't see that I might be even scared to write down, that I might be even scared to say to myself when nobody's watching, when nobody's looking, I don't want to remember these things. Why? Because it is absolutely, unequivocally, undeniably, and unambiguously proof that I could be defined as someone who is a failure, someone who has quit. And pick a space, any space. I've endeavored out and tried some things where I've gotten really, really high, and you could define it as if you would have just taken one more step, but I didn't, which could make it worse. I question these types of things. Who would you rather be? The person who takes iterative steps and gets really, really close to the door and maybe gets second place and is always in, like, you're on the podium, you get a medal, but you're like bronze and silver, never the gold. But you look at that person who's bronze and silver and you're like, man, you got everything that would be required. At least it is we who defines things. So I look and I analyze and I assess. We forget sometimes that one of the biggest things we could learn is, how do people see us? How do the world see us? Important, because it is highly likely, particularly when you exude and vibe at a high level, that people see you at a higher level than you see yourself. And we might misconstrue that we don't want to emanate a certain energy that can lead towards arrogance. We try to define that it is we who defines things. But people see us and like, wow, he's vibing really high. What a great looking, successful person that is. But because we know what's in the crevices of our soul and how we define things, we know there's some flaws and some weaknesses. We know we quit on ourselves a few times. We know we don't do everything we said we're going to do. We know there's some deep, dark thoughts. But so in that way, we know things that others don't know. But if we could see how people see us, it could be massively powerful in many ways. And typically, usually, most of the time, almost always, certainly, if you are moving in a direction where you're powering through and you're making a lot of steps towards success, the world is watching in a way that not everyone, most likely, it is we who defines things, is willing to do what you are doing, and people are witnessing you do it. But because you are witnessing yourself fail along the way, and the failure hurts along the way, you keep asking yourself and telling yourself, when am I going to stop? They're watching you go. They never see you wanting to stop, and boom, all of a sudden you ascend. You see some things, you do some things, you got a little bit, you took a little meat off the bone. They're witnessing it as, wow, right? That was great. What an amazing effort. What an amazing person. And what a successful person. You could see it as, I took enough meat. If I keep going for more meat and I strip it down to the bone, it's going to hurt even more. Or maybe even if I get too greedy, it might be, all these things play in our head, right? It is we who defines things. So consider how people are seeing us, how we're seeing ourselves, how there's conflict even in that. And sometimes in the same way, people see us and they have the opposite of, "Well, who do you think you are?" They're waiting for you to fall. They don't want to catch you either. There's no trust fall there. You lean back and hope for somebody to be there. Ain't nobody gonna be there. That's just my experience. That's what it's taught me. So I say all that to think about it is we who defines things. And I was going through this. It was so pervasive in my head that I felt like I didn't sleep. I felt like I was just talking this through. Like I had an entire session of this conversation in my head the entire time I slept, for however long I slept, however many hours it was. And you wake up and you feel this power, or whether or not you slept through it, whatever it is, you get these sensations, these urges, these thoughts, these philosophies that go on and ramble on and ping pong through your head, and then you wonder what to do with them, right? Because it is we who defines things. It is we who is our own witness. It is we who see, right? And we see, but we don't see. So all those things create conflict. Now, in that way, when I self-diagnose, self-assess, self-medicate, and I look in the mirror and I have a conversation with God, it's like, yo, today was one of those days where it was kind of like, all right, I get all the cliches. I understand. I do, and I do. I understand immensely that, oh man, it's supposed to be this way. God is not certainly restricting me. God is not playing mind games per se, or he's not, and it's not that God is he, the isness, the essence and the beauty of creator and creation and universe. It certainly isn't looking to defy me, right? It isn't, there's no benefit. There's no benefit to God to deceive, right? And we believe that. We believe that. And if we can release that power to say, I know I'm not being deceived. I believe we can ask the question of, man, I know you're not, I know you're not playing games with me, but why does it have to be this hard, right? Why why do we have to endure? Is it really necessary to make it this complicated? Does it have to be this difficult? And yo, you sometimes it's like, are you really there? Are you watching what I'm watching? Are you watching what I'm watching? Because if you were, and I'm asking for a little bit of a lifeline here, it seems like you choose to answer sometimes and sometimes you don't. So I have a moment of reflection and power, and it is we who defines things. And I get it. But it's also sort of like, yo, just a little bit of help. Sometimes it feels that way. Sometimes it's like, come on already. Come on. I certainly am not a masochist in the sense that, sure, overwhelm me. As I'm talking this out, and you hear the things that we say to ourselves. I think this is what I say to myself. Maybe you don't say it to yourself this way. Maybe you don't say anything to yourself. Whatever. It is we who defines things. And in the way that I'm fully aware that I'm capable of embracing all of the anxiety, stress, and doubt that comes with the process. I know the words and the language and the power and the laws. When you're experiencing it, it's quite different. It's quite different. And when you're experiencing it in an isolated, dark, sort of, man, unsupported way, when it really comes down to just you. And we might have decided to say, I'm going to embrace this. And when it's just me, I know it's just me because God is there. And so since God's there, and since it is we who defines things, I got to understand sometimes I'm not immune to conflict or the pressure or the obstacles, but I do need to sometimes ask, are you fucking with me? Right? I know you're not. I know. And maybe because we have to redefine where we're at to understand, I know. Maybe we have to talk it through to hear how it sounds and then say, I get it. So in that way, while I'm addressing and having conflict with Creator and God and universe, I get a message that says, why are you looking at me when you know it's all on you? Why are you looking at me when you know it's all on you? It's not to suggest, it's not to suggest that you can't, that God isn't an ally, that you shouldn't rely. You want a trust fall? God got you every time. I believe that. Forget believe. I have all the faith in the world. So it's easy when I realize it is a requirement of faith. It's not that I can't look and I shouldn't look or God doesn't want me to look. So when I say, why are you looking at me? It's all on you. Because it is we who defines things, God has already helped us define. God ain't going nowhere. God is supportive. It's all on you. How are you, how are we, how am I going to choose how I define things? If I define that God and universe and the world could possibly defy me, then guess what? God and universe and world will oblige me. If I choose to define that God and universe and world will support me, then guess what? God and universe and world will support you. How we define support certainly isn't always going to be sublime in the sense that we can't be naive and ignore the conflict that comes with the journey. We can't just crave the comfort of success without realizing the detriment of achieving success that occurs to us in mind, body, and spirit. It is we who defines things, and I'm not everybody, and I don't know everything, but I can't perceive a level of attaining for anybody. I don't care what you practice, how you pray, where you believe, or what's afforded to you. How do you ignore this part of the experience? How do you not feel like sometimes there is no support, that it is empty and hollow, and because everything is so vast and it's just you, that it's not enough? I don't know. I really don't know. I really, really don't know. But I do know it is we who defines things. It is we who defines things. I wrote this down. It is we who defines things, and how we define things either strips or creates our freedom. How we define things either strips or creates our freedom. How do we define ourselves? What is definable? What is self as definable? And again, some of us see but don't see. Some of us see but don't see. And depending on what you see and where you're seeing it at, will, of course, dictate how you define things. It is we who defines things. So, how would you define yourself today? Do you define yourself through materialism, through social experiences, through what you've attained and what you've accomplished, which a lot of that could be very logical. Why attain and why accomplish if not to be defined by those things? I don't know that that's wrong. I don't know that it's right. If I'm looking to attain, certainly should we be dismissive? If I pursue a career and I receive promotion after promotion after promotion and raise after raise after raise, and I reach a certain class financially and I'm afforded a certain lifestyle, right? I've experienced government assistance to pretty much being at the space where any type of schools, programs, extracurricular activities, a room for everyone, a bathroom for everyone, a car for everyone who needs to drive to get to where I need to get to. That's pretty decent. So when you go from, I don't know that it's an extreme, but when you take these steps and you do attain, should we be defined by these things? Because certainly, when left to explain yourself, why wouldn't you want to leverage that as, hey, this is who I am? And I ask the question, if it is we who defines things, is that who you really are? I don't know. Should it be that way? I don't know. Is it a positive? Sure. Is there a drawback? Possibly. Because then I would just ask, do you define yourself by what you've attained and the material associated with it and the titles and the stature, or do you define yourself by what it took to get there? And we might think the two are interrelated. They are in a way. However, if you start to trend your definition of self and how you define things towards what you have versus what you have, then there's a very, very stark difference. Because what you have, you'll feel like can be taken, but what you have can never be taken. I was watching something the other day. There's a guy, I believe, he's on social media everywhere. He goes around interviewing people who are highly successful and have attained millionaire and billionaire status. And one of the things he asks, which I think is a great question, if you lost everything today and you lost all your money today and you were broke tomorrow, could you get it back? And everyone answers the same way who was at that level, yes. And I ask, how do you define things? Because depending on how you define, things can be taken, but certainly there's things that can't be taken, right? I also wrote this down for us to consider and think about. Why do we associate our ability to create, move, or improve our lives with how we feel about how we define, with how we define how we feel about our lives? Why do we associate our ability to create, move, or improve our lives with how we define how we are feeling about our lives, right? I wrote this down too. I think it's going to help me get towards where I want to drive towards, I think a little bit. What about our insecurity, doubt, or fear must be defined as something is wrong or a reason to pause? This is where a lot of my thoughts went around. It is we who defines things, right? Our moods. If you haven't really taken time to figure out your identity or how you identify, certainly we can agree that how you feel has a massive impact on how you produce. But I asked the question, what, where, when, why, and how? I don't know. All those things. Did we come to the realization that Defining how we feel defines how we move. Defining how we feel defines what we produce. I don't understand that anymore. Certainly, I've lived that. Certainly, I understand and reason when someone says, I just didn't feel like it. Certainly, I understand and reason when people and folks and us define what has happened as an impetus not to move forward because we don't want it to happen again, but as a massive roadblock that we hit the pause button on our lives at that moment and never press play again. That we were writing our book and stopped in the middle chapters. A question. If it is we who defines things, what is it about how we define things that causes us to pause the movement on our lives? Maybe you are moving still. Maybe you believe you've never stopped moving. I also wonder, are you moving in the same direction all the time? Because if you're moving in the same direction all the time, sometimes you want to just move in that direction until you get what you want. And sometimes you're moving in the same direction over and over. That creates absolute madness and havoc in that you're moving but not really going anywhere. Big difference. We talk about it all the time. You're either moving to get somewhere or you're moving and staying in the same spot. But what about our definitions of how we feel do we associate and attribute to movement? Why do we need to feel a certain way to move? Do we need to define ourselves as inspired and motivated and spirited in order to accomplish tasks? Do we need to be inspired and motivated and spirited to have the desire to move forward? Do we need to have positive, loving, affectionate moments at all times in order to be defined as someone who is willing and able to create freedom for ourselves, however we seek to create freedom for ourselves? I'm just asking the question of, why do we need to define a specific set of emotions and feelings as a requirement in order to do what it is we think we need to do for ourselves? Think of it like this. Imagine that we've come to the realization that there are some things we want to do for ourselves. So we put ourselves under the pressure of thinking about all these things I got to do. I got to do this. 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 And you know why you got to do it. And we know why we got to do it. And after all that pressure of saying, I got to do these things, 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 we open our eyes and boom, we got to go do it. The hardest part to me is over. We know what we got to do. We know what we got to do. The pressure of knowing what we got to do is gone. Now the only pressure left is to just do. Can't we argue and reason that logically the pressure of having to think about what we're going to do is actually harder than the pressure to actually do it? So once we release the pressure of knowing what we got to do, why don't we do it? All that's left to do is do it. And so in the same way we put the pressure on ourselves to think about what do we got to do? What do we got to do? What do we got to do? We start putting ourselves under the pressure of, oh, I got to go do this. I got to go do this. I got to go do this. And how do we define I got to go do this? It's going to be painful. It's going to be hard. It's going to be arduous. I got to start from the bottom. The audacity of life for us to start at the bottom somewhere and have to work our way up. And that there's going to be pain in that. And that there's going to be conflict. And that there's going to be insecurities and doubts. All those things. Pick an emotion that will stop you. Any emotion. Pick one. Pick a reality of life. The weather. When it's cold. How many times have you heard this? How many times do we have to go through the cliches? There isn't a person in this world who can give me and define a valuable reason as to why not. We all know why not. We all know why not. But what is it about defining why not? When we define why not, that keeps us stagnant, stasis, and moving to not move. Do you really understand the power of inertia? That we reach, I have no qualms. I really I want to be sensitive. I'm not, it's, maybe you're perceiving this as me judging. I have nothing wrong with the average person. Go be average. I have I don't know why we frown so much. You're so average. You're so average. You're so average. I do we ask if people are happy? Are you happy? If you're happy, what's the problem? If you're happy, what's the problem? But the idea and the concept of inertia, that at some point we pressed pause on our lives when we really know we want to press play because we want to go somewhere, because we thought about everything we want to do. We know what we got to do. When we think about doing it, we can't find the power to do it. Because it is we who defines things, and we've defined that when we feel all these emotions that hurt, it means that we shouldn't do anything. What? What? Have we come to the realization that we're reasoning together? It's the logic. We have defined that if we don't feel exceptional about ourselves, if we don't feel God in our corner at every second of our lives, then it means we shouldn't move. That I got to feel like doing it in order to do it. It is we who defines things. You've defined what you got to do. You've defined what you need to do. But you can't seem to definitively move when you know you should move, presuming, of course, you think you should move. Because we've decided to define when it hurts, when it's going to be difficult, when we're conflicted, when we're angry, when we're sad, when we're depressed, when we're anxious, that all of that somehow means that we can't. That's false. That is false. I'm a regular, standard, average human just like you, regardless of my salary, regardless of my title, regardless of successes, regardless of what I have, regardless of what I don't have, regardless of what I'm destined to be and what I get. Listen, after I was done, and God said, why are you looking at me? You know it's on you. It's on me. I already am who I am. I already am who I am. I don't need no other validation. I don't need anybody else to affirm or confirm. Yep, I'm where I'm at. And I love being this. And I offer it to you in this way. I fight with myself every single day. Is this not what the improvement space is about? Is this not what we should be messaging to ourselves? That there are days when, yes, I'm vivacious and inspired and all the way spirited, where I feel like God. Those are easy. Easy wins. Easy wins. And there are many, 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 many more days, which mostly comes from all the effort it takes to get me to get that one vivacious, amazing, beautiful, grand day. It's like as high as I go is as low as I go. But guess what? I still do the same things I do when I'm high. I do them when I'm low. Because it is we who defines things. There's no magic sauce or powder or 30-day pill. It's just the reality that I can identify, that I can define as someone who is a quitter, a failure, who can fall on my fucking face, and I still do it. I just go do it. And there's no greater guarantee in life than if I just do it, then I'm continuing to be, regardless of how I define how I feel, because it is we who defines things. It is we who defines what we see because of what we see. What we have because of what we have. and the persistence in any direction, consciously or not, will return you that value, will return you feeling for feeling on that investment. It is we who defines things. There's nothing about what you've defined, what we might have defined for ourselves, that is insurmountable. At some point, it is very likely you hit the pause button. Not because you don't know what you need to do, not because we don't know what we need to do, not because we are not worthy. As God said to me today, why are you looking at me? You know it's on you, baby. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.